Hello everyone, and welcome to the first of my video tutorials on statutory interpretation. This one's going to be quite short because I just wanted to give you an overview really of what the topic's all about. In later videos I will go through the different rules on statutory interpretation, but for now we're just looking at an overview of the topic. So if we start off looking at the topic name, statutory interpretation. Statutory, obviously a bit like the word statute, and we know that a statute is just another name for an act of parliament. So what this topic's all about is how statutes or acts of parliament are interpreted or read and understood by the judges. Now you might be thinking, well, surely it's obvious. If something's written in an act of parliament, and hopefully a judge is a fairly intelligent person, surely it's clear how the act should be interpreted. But what we're going to see is that actually words are not always clear. They can have more than one meaning. They can change over time. And sometimes people can even argue about whether something falls into a particular category or not. So over the years, the courts have developed some different rules and approaches on how they're going to apply these acts of parliament in cases. Now on my PowerPoint, which is on Solar, you can see that I've also included some links here to other videos which you can find on YouTube, which provide a really nice introduction to the topic as well. These are from the Law Bank. So once you're in slideshow mode, if you click on these links, it'll take you to the videos on YouTube. So once you've watched this video, there are some others you can look at as well. And I think that's really important if you're studying this topic at home. So, onto the topic then, and I always like to start in class by considering quite a famous case. It's the case of United Biscuits from 1991, and it actually involved McVitie's. And the issue in this case was whether a Jaffa cake was classed as a cake or a biscuit. Now, without cheating and reading ahead, I just want you to take a minute, think to yourself, would you classify it as being a cake or a biscuit? Just 2 minutes to think about that, so you might want to pause the video here. So hopefully you've had a little think about that, maybe argued about it with some members of your family. The court actually had to consider arguments for it being a cake and arguments for it being a biscuit. And I've put here on the slide some of the arguments that the court actually considered. Now, the reason this actually came to court, and I'm sure you're thinking this seems really frivolous, a bit silly, the reason it came to court was that there was a legal issue to be decided. So there's a tax that's charged on chocolate-covered biscuits because they're classed as luxury items, but tax is not charged on cakes that are covered in chocolate. So McVitie's had always classified Jaffa cakes as cakes, but the tax authorities obviously wanted to claim tax on these items, so the tax authorities were arguing they were a biscuit. So this is McVitie's argument over here, saying that it's a cake, and you can see on this side, this was the tax authorities' argument saying that it's a biscuit. Now, the deciding argument in this case, according to the judge, he decided, and it's up to you whether you agree with him or not, he decided that it is actually a cake. And the reason for that is that he really sort of focused on this argument that when a Jaffa cake goes stale, it goes hard like a cake does rather than soft like a biscuit. So that was sort of the deciding factor for him. So it was decided to be a cake. So why am I getting you to think about Jaffa cakes? How does this link to statutory interpretation? Well, what I'm trying to show you here is that even a word that seems as simple, as innocuous as biscuit causes arguments. You know, you've got one side saying that something's a biscuit, and you've got another side saying something that it's a cake. And you can see that there are fairly valid arguments on both sides. So this is starting to show that the meanings of words are very important. They might have implications, you know, as we've seen in this case for tax. There might be other legal issues with words as well. So when we're looking at the meaning of words, we have to be thinking about how are we interpreting them. And that's really what this topic's all about. So statutory interpretation then is the process by which courts are interpreting and applying legislation. And again, just as a bit of an introduction to this topic, I'd like you to have a look at some of these words here, and just want you to think about what are the meaning of these words and phrases. Are they clear? And again, I'll just make this a bit bigger here so you can see all of those words. There you go. So I just want you to have a look at some of these words. Think, are the meaning of these words clear? I've also got some phrases for you here. And again, I'd recommend just pausing the tutorial for a minute at this point, just so you can have a think about some of these words. So hopefully you pause there, but I just want to show you, talk to you through why I've included some of these words and how they link to what we're looking at here. So if I just pick out a couple of them, if we think about the word maliciously to begin with, in ordinary everyday language, if someone's malicious, if they act maliciously, we know that that means that there's something a bit evil about what they've done. They've done something deliberately, aggressively, sneakily maybe. That's sort of the normal understanding of the word maliciously. But from our study of criminal law, we know that malicious actually has a very specific legal meaning. It actually means recklessly in law. So when we've looked at GBH, some of the mens reas have malicious in them, meaning actually recklessness, which is actually quite different to our common use of the word. The word dog is an interesting one. That word posed a particular problem in the Dangerous Dogs Act, because the Dangerous Dogs Act made it illegal to have a particular type of dog. But if you think about the meaning of the word dog, it can have two distinct meanings. It can refer obviously to the type of animal that lots of people have as a pet, but it also refers to the gender of the animal. So a male dog is a dog and a female dog is a bitch. So if we're using the word dog in an Act of Parliament, if we're using the literal meaning of the word, then technically it doesn't actually cover the female version, the female bitch. So that's, again, showing you that the meaning of words are not always clear. If we think about the word gay, for example, this is a really interesting word that has changed meaning really over time. Years ago, the word gay meant that you were happy if something was gaily coloured, it was brightly coloured. Whereas today, obviously, it has quite a different meaning, and you know that it means homosexual. I've also included some phrases here, and depending on the punctuation, the sentence reads completely differently. So if we go with this one here, let's eat mum, that's meaning, strangely, that we're going to eat our mother. But if we put a comma here, let's eat mum, we're telling our mum that we want to eat. So what I'm trying to get across to you here is that punctuation, the meaning of words are not always clear. And I've got another example for you here. The word secure. So if we look here to the Marines, the word secure means attack and kill everyone inside. If you are to secure a building, that's what it means, to take over the building in essence. To the Navy, if you secure something, it means put a lock on the door. And to the Air Force, the word secure means sign a 5-year lease agreement with an option to buy. So this is sort of a jokey sort of phrase, but again, it's showing you that the meaning of words might potentially mean different things to different people. So all of that really is trying to give you an introduction for why we have rules on statutory interpretation for interpreting Acts of Parliament. So what I've been trying to show you over the last couple of slides is that a word may have several meanings, which can lead to ambiguity. And you could maybe think of some examples of words that maybe have several meanings. We mentioned the word dog before. We also mentioned the word gay potentially. And gay, another interesting example to use here, because the word gay also shows that the meaning of words can change over a period of time and can actually mean very different things. Reason 3, why we need stat. The law may have been drawn up very quickly, therefore the wording might not have been precise as we would have liked it. The Dangerous Dogs Act is a lovely example of this because this was a piece of legislation that was a knee-jerk reaction to a spate of attacks by dogs that were happening at that time. And this piece of law was actually passed in one night. And as a result, it's not written brilliantly, and therefore, it can lead to ambiguity in application. We've also got changes in technology. So, particularly in areas of medical science, law might be applied differently. Time moves on between them passing an Act of Parliament and what we can actually do medically. And we're going to see that later on in this topic with a really interesting famous case called the Royal College of Nursing and the DHSS. And that's all about whether it was legal for nurses to give out abortion pills. And the difficulty there was that the Abortion Act was written in 1967, but this case was coming many years afterwards when technology had moved from just being operations to actually the facility to take abortion tablets. Excuse me. So the judges had to consider whether the nurses were breaking the law there or not. We've also got to consider the possibility that the drafting of the original bill may have contained errors, that people are only human and therefore there might be mistakes in the law. And we looked at the Offences Against the Person Act 1861 when we were looking at non-fatal offences. And we did talk about the fact that there might have been a mistake in terms of the sentencing between the Section 47 and the Section 20 offence. As a final example, as an introduction to this topic, I'd like to leave you today with the case of Cheeseman and the DPP. And this is a really interesting case that again shows that the meaning of words can be very important in a case. In this case, the police witnessed a man masturbating in a public toilet. And he was arrested and he was being charged under the Town Police Clauses Act of 1847, which is obviously a very ancient Act of Parliament. And this made it an offence to upset, quote, passengers on the, quote, street. So the issue in this case was over the meaning of the word passenger and over the meaning of the word street. Now, passenger to you and I means somebody that you are taking in the passenger seat of your car, someone who's not the driver. But when the judge in this case used a dictionary from 1847, he discovered that the meaning of the word passenger at the time that the Act was passed actually meant passerby, someone who was just walking past, a pedestrian. The meaning of the word street simply meant any public place. And the outcome of this case was that Mr. Cheeseman was not guilty of an offence under this Act because the court used the literal rule. And what they said was the police had gone to the public toilets for the very purposes of catching him, and therefore, technically, they were not passengers. Because whilst he was in a public place, he was in the street in effect, in a public toilet, they were not passengers because they were not genuine passerbys, they were not pedestrians, they were not ordinary people there to use the toilet, they were there to apprehend him. So therefore, using the literal rule, he's not guilty because he hasn't actually offended a passenger. So again, I think this case is a really lovely introduction to statutory interpretation, to why it's important, and also just how significant it can be on the outcome of a case. Had the meaning of the word been slightly different, obviously he would have been guilty. Okay, so that's our introduction to statutory interpretation. I will make some further videos on the other aspects of the topic.